When I lifted my garage door the morning before vacation, my car was gone. Sitting in its place was Karen's BMW. She stood nearby with that smug little smile and said, "It's community property." I didn't argue. I simply closed the garage, secured it, hung a bright sign that read, "Gone for weeks. Do not disturb." Then I left. 2 weeks later, the entire neighborhood couldn't stop talking about what happened inside that garage. My name's Dan. I used to live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, peaceful, predictable, until Karen became HOA president. She was the type who measured grass with a ruler and fined you if your trash bin lingered at the curb 30 seconds too long. For months, I brushed off her petty tyranny. Then one morning, everything shifted. I opened my garage and froze. My car had vanished. In its place sat a white BMW. Karen's BMW. I marched to her front door and knocked. She answered wearing that artificial, syrupy smile. "Oh, hi, Dan. I noticed you weren't home, so I parked in your garage. HOA regulations allow shared property use." I stared at her. "You parked in my garage." Without asking, she folded her arms, smirking. "It's not your garage. It's community property. You're just an HOA tenant." My jaw tightened. I wanted to explode, but instead I smiled. "All right, Karen. If it's community property, then responsibility is shared too, right?" "Exactly," she said proudly. That night, I drove to the hardware store and bought a heavy-duty yellow locking gate. I installed it across the garage entrance, locked it tight, with her BMW still inside. Then I hung a red sign across the bars. "Gone for weeks. Do not disturb." By sunrise, the neighborhood buzzed. Karen stormed out in her robe, phone flailing in her hand. "Dan, you can't do this." HOA Section 3.4. I leaned casually against my truck. "Sounds like an HOA issue." She called the police. When the officer arrived and heard the explanation, he chuckled. "Ma'am, if you park without consent, this is civil. He's within his rights." "This isn't over," she screamed. I waved, tossed my suitcase into the truck bed, and replied, "Oh, I'm sure it isn't." Then I drove off for my 2-week vacation, while her revenge campaign was just beginning. By the time I reached my mountain cabin, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, furious texts, voice messages. "Dude, Karen's losing it," one neighbor said. "She's pacing outside your garage like a lunatic." I didn't answer. I powered my phone down and poured a cup of coffee. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Back home, chaos. Karen called the police again, this time accusing me of illegally detaining her vehicle. Officers arrived, inspected the scene, and shook their heads. "Ma'am, you parked it there. That's trespassing, not theft." "I'm the HOA president," she shouted. "He can't lock me out." "Then file in civil court," one officer replied flatly. That night, she returned with a locksmith. "Cut it open," she demanded. The locksmith hesitated, noticing the security camera above the door. "Ma'am, that's property damage under surveillance. I'm not risking my license. I'll pay double." Still not worth it. The next morning, she phoned the fire department, claiming an emergency vehicle hazard. Firefighters arrived, peeked inside, and shrugged. "No fire, no danger. We can't intervene." "You're useless," she yelled as they left. What she didn't realize was that every second of her meltdown streamed directly to my cloud storage. By day 3, she lost all composure. She climbed my fence, pried open a side window, and tried to crawl inside. The moment her foot hit the garage floor, whoop, whoop, intrusion detected. She screamed, stumbling backward. "He's insane. He set traps." Neighbors poured out, phones raised, capturing it all. By evening, the video of HOA President Karen attempting to break into my garage was viral in the local Facebook group. That night, sitting by my cabin fireplace, I turned my phone back on. Hundreds of notifications. Comments like, "Justice served." Finally, someone stood up to her. I leaned back and smirked. The rules, Karen, apply both ways. 2 weeks later, I returned home calmer than I'd felt in years. But as I turned onto my street, something felt off. News vans lined the curb. Reporters lingered. Neighbors whispered. Karen stood beside her BMW, arms crossed, wearing a triumphant grin. "There he is," she shouted. "The man who imprisoned my car." Before I could respond, a sheriff handed me an envelope. "You've been served." I opened it and nearly laughed. Emotional distress. Property damage. Violation of HOA Regulation 12.7. Instead of panicking, I called my lawyer, Avery, sharp and unflappable. She scanned the lawsuit and asked, "Do you still have a footage?" "Every second," I said. A week later, we stood in county court. The tension was thick. Karen sat opposite me in a bright red blazer, flanked by board members. The judge, an older man with piercing eyes, addressed her. "Mrs. Wilson, you claim unlawful detention of your vehicle. Evidence." She stood confidently. "He locked my car inside his garage for 2 weeks without consent." The judge turned to us. "Defense?" Avery rose. "Your Honor, we have video showing the plaintiff parking without permission, followed by multiple trespassing attempts." Silence. Karen's smile vanished. "That's a lie," she snapped. Avery pressed a remote. The footage filled the courtroom screen. Karen driving into my garage. Karen climbing my fence. Karen triggering the alarm. Whoop! Whoop! Intrusion detected. Gasps echoed. Karen covered her face. "Mrs. Wilson." The judge said sternly, "This is clear trespass." Her attorney said nothing. The gavel struck. Case dismissed. Mr. Daniels acted within his rights. The HOA will cover legal fees. Karen's perfect facade collapsed. Outside, neighbors whispered approvingly. An elderly man nodded at me. "About time." I smiled. Sometimes truth is the most satisfying revenge. If the story gave you chills, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because more unbelievable HOA dramas are coming next. That night, though, I couldn't sleep. Karen's last muttered warning, "He'll come back," echoed in my mind. The garage felt heavier somehow. I activated every camera and light. At 2:37 a.m., the motion sensor flashed red. On the monitor, a hooded man stood outside the garage door, staring straight into the lens. I dialed 911 and ran outside with flashlight. He bolted toward the trees beyond the cul-de-sac. Police sirens arrived quickly, but he was gone. The next morning, Karen appeared at my door again, this time pale and shaking. She handed me a worn brown envelope. "He's not random," she whispered. "He used to own this house." I stared at her. "What?" "Before the HOA bought the land, it belonged to his family. They forced him out. He swore he'd reclaim it. He's been watching us, all of us." Suddenly, everything aligned. The cryptic HOA newsletter notes. The unexplained break-ins. The rumors about vacant properties. This wasn't about parking spaces. It was decades-old revenge. The next morning, I stormed into the HOA office. "You knew?" I demanded. "You sold disputed land?" The director, cold in a Navy suit, barely blinked. "If it's vacant, it's public. That's policy." I recorded every word. This wasn't incompetence. It was deliberate concealment. Karen parked in my garage because she was afraid of the same shadow now circling my home. By noon, police vehicles lined the street. Investigators carried boxes from the HOA office. Karen stood beside me, eyes red. Maybe now it's over. I glanced at the garage, the epicenter of it all. "No," I said quietly. "It's not over until they all answer." The camera lingered as the garage door creaked shut. A single security light flickered overhead. For the first time in weeks, the neighborhood fell silent. Then, just as the light blinked out, a single knock echoed from inside the garage. Fade to black.